a little off on a tangent a little bit. Just recently, I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about the strikes going on and with the writers and actors, and a big part of that is AI and writing. And actually, one of our mutual friends, David Papose, just recently had a good thread about AI and comic books and the
Mm.
kind of, I guess you could say, threat and uncertainty that comes with that. So being someone who obviously in Batman Beyond, you have Gotham as an AI villain. And then one of your first books that you and Colin ever did together was Hacktivists, which also dealt with kind of AI and the threat of technology and stuff. So I feel you have a very unique perspective on what's going on right now with the whole AI and as specifically how it translates into writing. And so, one, I want to know, like, again, what is your kind of perspective on that? And also, does that ever worry you guys as comic book writers? Like that obviously we've seen, comic book art from AI, we've seen some scripts, but especially with the strikes going on, do you
Yeah.
guys fear that that will translate over into the comic book side of things, or what are your guys' thoughts on that?
So, I mean, look, Colin and I are WJ members. We are currently on strike. Like we were supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be on the show this whole period of time, and
Mm-hmm.
it, are not because we are on strike. So I stand in full solidarity with the guild
Mm-hmm.
on this point. I think AI has no business in writing. I think it needs to get out. I think there are aspects of it that feel like interesting tools. Colin, I know, would give you a different answer as
Mm-hmm.
regards ChatGPT, just because he is very interested in its utilization as a search engine and as a sort of like workforce function. I think there's aspects of that Colin has kind of been like privately obsessed with and has kind of been like figuring out. And he's a really, really smart dude. So I tend to be like, if he sees something in it, I believe there's something in it, but not
Mm-hmm.
something that's going to write for you.
Yeah,
But
a
something,
tool to be
but
used, not the thing.
a tool for the accumulation of information in ways that are maybe easier than, or not maybe easier, but maybe more like completist than Google. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, we've seen all over the place that ChatGPT is perfectly willing to just make shit up and not source itself or not cite itself, right? So I don't know how reliable it is.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling on the wider scope of it of like, am I worried about AI? Absolutely, 100%. I'm worried about AI. I'm worried about it because I think that anybody who's like, oh well, this can never do that, is fooling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think absolutely, if you train this stuff well enough and you build, we've only been doing this for a few years. Imagine what we can do with 20 more years of development, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look
If
at
we,
Ultron.
if the goal can exactly if the goal continues to be replace the workforce in any space,
Mm-hmm.
if the goal continues to be replace the workforce, eventually that workforce will be replaced. uh, we cannot replace our creative workforce. I don't think really we should replace most of our workforces. I think the place where AI should probably replace a workforce is in places where people are being exploited. If
Mm-hmm.
there are exploitative industries that are truly damaging the people who are working inside of them, and AI can take that over instead, then great, do that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
all for it. Because as long as we can retrain those people or find another place for them to work, and we have a social safety net of any kind that would actually allow for those people to live good lives, all about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But AI should service humans, not the other way around. So I really do not think that we're in this scenario um, in a way that's like irrevocable either. I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's inevitable. It's like, it is not. We can pass laws. We can just the other day, they were like, you can't copyright AI art.
Mm-hmm.
That's now a legal decision in the United States. Great. Let's affirm that all the way up to the Supreme Court. Let's affirm that and enshrine that in law. Let's make sure that it's incredibly clear that you cannot copyright AI written or AI drawn art, so that these companies have no choice but to use human labor, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to protect human labor in this regard. The worst part of this is if we don't do that, and say we do end up with comic books written by AI, right? Worst case scenario. And they can do it halfway decently. Here's the problem. I'm not sure you're ever going to be able to train an AI to innovate. I think you can train an AI to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can train an AI to tread water. And I think you can train an AI to do cyclical. I don't know that you can train an AI to innovate. So I don't think an AI is ever going to be able to give you without Grant Morrison input, I don't think an AI can give you a Grant Morrison output.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking about like that psychic the psychic rescue issue of New X-Men, the like silent issue where they go into Charles's brain and discover Cassandra Nova for the first time. And it's all silent and it's all in like symbology. And then at the very, very end, they come out and there's one line of dialogue and it's like, Charles Xavier killed his twin and now she's alive and now she's trying to kill us, Cassandra Nova. And it's like, oh, that's what we got out of this issue. Mm-hmm. I don't think a computer could write that without the input.
Yeah.
I think a human brain has to think around the problem and get to it in a creative way. Mm-hmm. And AI is not going to be able to do that because of the way the algorithm functions. It's just like a core base level of like, it needs an input to create an output. But we have a lot of input. So you can feed a lot of input into these AIs now and train them to replicate. And what we end up with in comics is the exact opposite of what we were all talking about an hour ago, about how the MCU needs something to feed it, mm-hmm. how the culture needs something to feed it, how the comic books are laying down track. And AI will build the track in a circle.
Yeah.
And then we'll just be going down the goddamn drain, right? And that's bad news. It's bad news for our culture. It's bad news for our lives. It's bad news for the stuff we love. It's bad news for our politics. It's bad news across the board. We cannot go in a circle. We need to move forward. If we don't move forward and we don't change some of the ways that we do things, we're not going to have a planet. We're not going to have a country. We're not going to have people who are safe. We're not going to have anything. We need to be able to move forward and innovate on this stuff. And if we just rely on computers to do it for us before we're ready to give them, like, before we're ready to give our will to those computers, if we're just taking the computer's will, bad. Yeah. I am a big believer long-term in the idea that you can, and this is what Hacktivist is, right? Hacktivist isn't really about the dangers of technology. Hacktivist is, especially the first volume, is about the benefits of it. It's about, it's an optimistic book. It's almost, I remember, I think IGN called that book dangerously naive. And I tend to agree with them because the first volume is literally about how like Twitter is going to save the world. Ultimately, right, we were wrong. And book 2 is kind of about how Twitter failed to save the world. And if you ever do a book 3, it will probably be its own response to what's happened then, right? Yeah, goddamn. But I don't need to write about Elon Musk in Hacktivist. I'm writing about him in Batman Beyond. Donovan Lumos is a pretty one-to-one fucking. But I think the way that Hacktivist was designed to say is like, and the way that a lot of like utopian science fiction, Star Trek, the Culture books by Ian Banks, which are some of my favorite books, they presuppose that eventually we can have an AI that we can give the task of managing and operating the complex system that keeps all of us safe and happy and healthy. And I'm down with that. I think at some point, the idea of being like, we're going to hand over the keys to the operational side of it, like our COO is an AI, I'm actually kind of all right with, as long as the rest of us are telling that thing what we need and getting what we need out of it. It can't be telling us what to do. We have to be telling it what we need and then making sure that we're getting something back that is valuable. And if that means that it can solve problems of poverty, that it can solve problems of social engineering, that it can solve problems of media bias, like if it can get into some of that stuff and can unpack some of the problems that humans have done to ourselves and can maybe provide some solutions or some avenues towards managing our way out of them, I'd love that. That'd be great. I don't think it should be writing movies. I think that's a silly fucking thing for it to do.
Yeah, that's
a really cool tool. Why are you asking it to write Captain America? Like I'm not that expensive. Like that's
Jack's like, I'm available, guys. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's my feeling on AI. I think it should get the help that it works. I don't know why it has a lot of application in other places. Please don't make it make art. What a silly idea.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we could not be